SEP Fanfic Readings presents Finding Hermione by ebookdragon. This chapter has been edited to maintain community guidelines. After a long and very satisfying shower together, Draco reluctantly released her and stepped away, kissing her softly, before he walked into their closet to get dressed. He set out his clothes for the day: boxers, socks, dark denim jeans, gray long-sleeve button-down shirt, and a sapphire sweater. He was just tying his boots up when Hermione walked in gloriously naked, with her hair in soft chestnut curls around her shoulders. He stayed on the bench in the middle of the closet as he watched her gather her own clothing for the day. Matching green lace bra and knickers were pulled out of the drawer and set on the bench beside him. He ran his hands down her backside as she walked by him. She handed him a pair of acid-wash jeans and a hunter green sweater. A silky soft green camisole was pulled out of the drawer along with a pair of socks. "So beautiful," he said when she sat down on his leg. He handed her knickers to her, enjoying this part of their morning ritual. They'd learned earlier this week not to try and get dressed at the same time if they wanted to leave the room. She stood up, pulling on her lace knickers, and he handed her bra to her and turned her so that he could press kisses along the waistband of her knickers. Hermione turned into his embrace as she snapped closed the front closure of her bra. He buried his face in between her breasts, humming in pleasure. She ran her hand down his face and backed away from him, pulling her camisole over her head. "What are your plans for today?" she asked, looking down at him. "I thought I would start working with Minerva on flying this morning," Draco said, smiling at the thought. "What are you planning on doing today?" "After breakfast, I'm going to Diagon Alley with your mother to do some Christmas shopping. I thought I'd take Rose and Scorpius with me," Hermione said as she sat down beside him on the bench and pulled on her socks and shoes. He ran the palm of his hand down her back. She wanted to spend the morning with his son. He hadn't even suggested it yesterday. She asked him if she could take Scorpius with her. She stood up and took his hand, and they made their way out of the bedroom and down the stairs to the dining room. Scorpius, Minerva, and Rose were still gathered around the dining table eating their breakfast in their pajamas. From the looks of things, they had started breakfast right before Hermione and Draco walked in. Hermione walked around the left side of the table, dropping a kiss on Minerva's head, then Scorpius, telling them good morning. She continued walking around the table and kissed Rose good morning after sitting in the chair Draco was holding out for her. Draco sat down in his own chair and levitated the dishes of food over to him. He quirked an inquiring brow at Hermione. She answered his query by saying, "I'm famished this morning, Draco, and it will be a long day." Draco took that to mean she wanted to fill up before the day began. He filled her plate with scrambled eggs, bacon, and hash browns. He levitated her plate over to her before filling a bowl of fresh fruit for her. Scorpius came over with a cup of coffee and set it down beside Hermione and set another down beside Draco. "Minerva told me how you like your coffee," Scorpius said. Hermione placed a hand on his cheek. "Thank you, dear." Draco stopped Scorpius with a hand on his shoulder before he sat back down. "Thank you, buddy. Good job." Scorpius sat down, looking a little pink around the ears. Everyone ate quietly for a while, the clang of silverware on plates the only noise in the room. Draco opened up the paper and turned to the gossip and society pages, as had become his habit over the last several months. He smiled down at the pictures he found. The mysterious journalist had managed to capture a picture of them leaving the train station. The three children walking side by side. Scorpius talking to Minerva over Rose's head and those absurd blinking antlers. Rose rotating her attention between the two. Hermione and Draco were walking behind them, arms around each other, with similar expressions of happiness. "Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy reunited with their children today as they picked them up from the train station for the start of Christmas vacation. From the happy expressions on the children's faces, we can assume that their parents' new relationship is not causing the children any unhappiness. Ron Weasley was not seen on the platform for the arrival of the train to greet his three children that were there. Lavender Brown picked up her eldest, and the two quickly left the platform. Ginny and Harry Potter were there to pick up their son, James. The Potters have been seen quite frequently in the company of Draco Malfoy and his fellow Slytherins, which makes us wonder about the state of his friendship with his brother-in-law, Ron Weasley. Has the Golden Trio broken up to form a new group, leaving Ron Weasley out in the cold? Only time will tell." Draco said, sipping his coffee. Hermione shot him an interested look, and Draco handed the section over to her. He watched her as she took in the picture and the article. A slight smile played across her face as she read. She frowned at one part, then quirked an eyebrow at another. She set the article down and took a sip of coffee as well. Scorpius and Minerva were watching Hermione. The paper seemed to be something they were interested in now. Hermione caught them watching her and wordlessly passed them the paper. Minerva took it and set it between her and Scorpius to read. Minerva looked up from the article, commenting, "I didn't even see Fred when we arrived." "He was behind you when you got off the train," Draco said to her. "He wasn't walking with anyone else." "That's because he doesn't have any friends," Scorpius said matter-of-factly, then went back to eating his breakfast. "That's sad," Hermione said quietly. "Sad?" Minerva screeched, looking at her mother in disbelief. "Yes, Minerva, sad. It's sad that he's at school away from his family and he hasn't got any friends. It's incredibly lonely being so far away from your family, and no one will talk to you," Hermione said to her daughter. Scorpius seemed to decide that his plate of food was incredibly interesting, rather than joining in on this conversation. "No one wants to talk to him because he was an arrogant brat. He called Scorpius Death Eater scum on the train to school. He made fun of my hair and tripped me in the Great Hall before the sorting even started. James got into a fight with him right after he tripped me," Minerva raged at her mother. "Minerva, you will learn throughout your life that people act a certain way for a great many reasons. I'm not excusing what he did. He owes you both an apology for his behavior. Since you will be going over to his home to visit your father, I hope that you will at least not be openly hostile," Hermione said calmly to her daughter, looking across the table and continuing to sip her coffee while being glared at. In that moment, she reminded him of his mother. His mother was rarely one to ever shout. He or his father would rage around her while she calmly told them that they were wrong or they were expected to behave a certain way and just sip her tea while they raged. It always worked. She always got them to fall in line, but his mother always knew when to pick her battles, too. "As long as you're not expecting me to be friends with him," Minerva said mulishly. Minerva smiled slightly. If Draco hadn't been watching her, he would have missed it. "I wouldn't dream of telling you who to be friends with." Draco passed Hermione the rest of the paper to read. Rose was happily eating her breakfast and sipping her juice, completely oblivious to the tension around her. Scorpius seemed to think it was safe to look up from his plate without being drawn into the conflict between mother and daughter. Draco took a sip of coffee and looked at Minerva. "Are you ready to begin your flying lessons, Minerva?" Minerva took a gulp of her juice and nodded. She went from looking upset with her mother to looking nervous in a split second. Draco understood her nervousness. "We'll start with broom identification today, as well as care and maintenance. If you're comfortable, after that, we'll start on safety lessons in the park," Draco continued. "Okay, that sounds good," Minerva said, looking a little more confident. "Don't worry, Minerva. My dad's the best at teaching flying," Scorpius said, looking at Minerva. "Yeah, Minnie. Daddy teached me to fly. I can catch a snitch," Rose said from across the table. "Taught," Hermione corrected. "Daddy taught you to fly." "Scorpius," Hermione said, "would you like to come with us to Diagon Alley today?" "Yeah, could you help me pick out some things for my friends?" Scorpius said shyly. "Of course, dear. Nana Sissa should be here soon, so let's get our breakfast finished up and go get dressed," Hermione said. The three children wolfed down the rest of their breakfast and escaped the table. Draco could hear their laughter as they raced up the stairs. "He'll want to get jewelry for Florence. A simple beaded bracelet is fine, but nothing more extravagant," Draco said as soon as the children were out of earshot. "Jewelry for 11-year-olds? That seems a bit much, Draco. Surely chocolates would be more appropriate," Hermione said. "I've been holding him off on buying jewelry for her for the last 5 years now. Plus, he's a Malfoy and my son. You know I tend to go a bit overboard. I filled the Potter's house with flowers because you didn't wear knickers to the ball at Ginny's suggestion," Draco said, grinning. Hermione laughed. "I can just imagine Harry's face seeing all those flowers. I wonder if Ginny told him why you sent them." His mother walked into the dining room just as they were getting up from the table. Hermione hugged her, and Draco went over to kiss her on both cheeks. "Are you almost ready to go, Hermione?" his mother asked. "We're just waiting on Scorpius and Rose to finish getting ready. Scorpius wants to get presents for his friends. I've been warned not to let him to go overboard," Hermione addressed his mother. "Yes, like father, like son in this case," his mother said, looking fondly over at him. Scorpius came pounding down the stairs. Minerva and Rose were close on his heels. Draco helped Rose into her coat and handed Scorpius his. He took Hermione's over to her and helped her into it. They all walked into the drawing room. The little fairies swirled around the children when they walked in, but were shooed back to the tree by Hermione and his mother. Flue powder was thrown into the fireplace, and his mother stepped in with Scorpius and Rose. Draco kissed Hermione quickly before she stepped in after them and called out, "The leaky cauldron!" With a swirl, they were gone, leaving him standing with Minerva. "Well, Minerva, are you ready to start your lessons?" he asked the nervous girl. Time to bond with his future daughter. He held the door open for her, and they walked out of the drawing room together.